The idea of the gloves was developed because a friend of mine couldn't play the drums, a drum kit with her feet because of her legs, and she had other sort of disabilities. So I decided to transfer the instrument to the hands. I got the idea when I was in Kerala, when I saw Indian dancers using their fingers. Of course, I electrified that. So I transferred all this information onto a little synthesizer, one a very early synthesizer by Casio. The idea was to release my friend from the bondage of using her legs so she could put it all on her hands. Start. Or stop. Let's have a go. Drum one. And the samples. So I did a UK patent application in 1988 and I did designs for the glove, and a guy now known as Emma Charles, he made the mechanics of it. I created the concept. And eventually I got a patent granted a few years later. But of course I learned something in the process. Patents can be annihilated. The big pigs can take it. How I knew that it had been nicked is that in the patent application there was a technical error that only someone like me could make, because it was innumerate error. And the people who tried to nick it printed the same error in their application, so it was... The alien contact was just one aspect of the end part of the Punishment of Luxury. I was working with a couple of different guys, Eddie Hall, bass player, and Tony Wright, a drummer. And we were doing performances all using the gloves. And one of the big things we used was a performance jacket, as something inspired by the performance jacket of Salvador Dali. I took the idea of the jacket with the glass, and this one here is with a belt here with all these different information, all transferred through the hand. This was going to turn the whole item into a performance item, so I should do this live with a song called The Conjurer. Not released yet, but maybe at some point. So this is a performance jacket, which meant the whole body can be used to communicate sound and vision and trigger anything. So I came up with a character called Max Pluto, who arrived on Earth and thought, how can I make contact? The concept of using the gloves meant that someone who was alienated, if you like, from society artistically could now make contact. So this idea has developed into alien contact. So the idea, the concept came from the gloves, and the rest was built on the character of Max Pluto, who had lots of comments about Earth and how people did make contact, and who was alienated and who could be connected. So when it comes to performance with the magic fingers and with Max Pluto, firstly I worked with a company called Mutoid Waste. They used to take over factories and warehouses and run all sorts of fantastic gigs with circuses. One notable event is the Brixton Academy. We worked with them, they had their massive sculptures, and we all had the gloves and were suspended in the air. We used the gloves to play music live, and that was great. We did it with all sorts of dancers, and it was quite an extravagant, fun event. I suppose the biggest, most successful aspect of the event is when we played Covent Garden Piazza. I created a thing called Max Pluto's All Aliens Day. I got together with some of the dancers from Starlight Express. We rehearsed in their lunch hour, really, before they did the night show. And we made all the costumes of all the characters, the aliens, the goblins, and all the different people. They used a lot of masks, as we did with the band Punishment Luxury, used masks, like 3 face masks. But they did it all on skate. We had an aliens and goblins game. Max Pluto has landed in Covent Garden today. This is the game that kids would have. Max has come to deliver a message to everyone on Earth in a special performance. There you'll meet the aliens and goblins and hear the experience of Max's musical message through his magic fingers, which were the gloves. What I asked the audience to do is to try and follow Max's route around the garden. So we'll pick places like NatWest, restaurants and the piazza, so people can follow his journey around. And that finished up in a big performance. Working with the dancers, what I found is that they had a lot of really good ideas. It's when you develop ideas and work with different people. It's great to do it because you've got to let go, but you've got to listen as well, and you can get some great inputs. And one guy who did the main captain, the policeman if you like, he was watching people. He was the one that made contact. There's a guy who was a homeless person, just suddenly walked in the middle of the show, and they made contact. The next event was a Glastonbury festival where I did some solo versions of it, where I played acoustic guitar. So I'd play different sections and I'd talk about the story. And I'd talk about how Max Pluto came to Earth, his vision and how he saw the world. I did that gig with Beverly Martin on one of the smaller stages, but it was really good to actually try these devices, these gloves out live. We recorded a single called Alien Contact using the gloves. I worked with a producer called David Bickley. So on one side the single was Alien Contact, and on the other was the last ever Punishment of Luxury single called Party Gobblins. That's the single there. There is Max Pluto. Copyright Max Pluto, even aliens have copyright. During the experimentation with the gloves, something very odd happened. I played Is Max Pluto an Alien? But when I played the sample backwards, it said, I just fancy an alien. Alien remained the same. It's very odd, it's phonetics, it's how sound works. I was working with some scratch artists in Hackney at the time, and I thought, well, let's put this into a single. It started when Punilux did Jellyfish and Engine of Excess. We wanted an A side, an X side, and a C side, the C side for Jellyfish. And we wanted a double groove record. The company didn't go for that, so they re-released it twice, so I sold a lot of records instead of putting it all together. So continuing with that double groove and playing with grooves, we got a cut by a guy called George Peckham, Porcupine Cuts. I asked George if he could cut that into there on the tail out, so he cut Is Max Pluto an Alien? And when you scratched it backwards, it was I Just Fancy an Alien. I developed lots of things like alien art, Max Pluto's Alien Contact, and I did Nev Luxury's Alien Residency, poetry, and a little guitar. Did a whole lot of postcards, stories of money talks, money lies. So Max got a picture of how the earth was run, and he had lots of comments, and it was to enrich people's view of what he saw from the outside looking in.